pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We begin the meeting with a moment of silence, and if you could keep the family of Ralph Mitchell in mind as we do that. Ralph was, when I read Ralph's obituary, I was really thrown back at what a remarkable guy he was and what an experience he had had. He retired as a lieutenant colonel. He had his own financial group, financial business, 2 master's degrees, one a master's in business from the Sawyer School of Suffolk. I wish I had known him other than being on the finance committee, because I could have learned so much from him. But if we could remember a really special man. And when I think of him, I think of actually a Tug McGraw song in which he talks about how you should be humble and kind. And I think that describes the Ralph that I knew from these meetings. This meeting's being recorded and televised by the local cable committee. I'd like a motion to approve payroll and bill warrants.
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion? All those in favor? Motion to accept correspondence in the read file.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Public forum. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on something that's not on the agenda? Approval of meeting minutes, open session, December 17th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? And we are here with a joint meeting with the Finance Committee, very important meeting. And I know that Kathy and Sean and Mary Beth and Kathy and some citizens like Mr. Galvin, and I think Frank Lynham was involved also, have been going crazy over the last couple of weeks trying to put things together so that we don't completely lose our shirts at this town meeting. Kathy, would you like to say anything before we start?
I'll start off just briefly by saying that I think the working group was a brilliant idea, so that the lines of communication have been kept open. I've learned from Sean Kane's thoughtful listening and consideration of issues that are counted to his position, that he rethinks things, so I'm learning to do the same thing, Sean. So thank you for, setting that example, because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should be listening twice as much as we talk. And I think we're all working very hard to come up with a budget that will provide the services for the town and a narrative that will explain why these services are needed and what's at stake if the citizens choose not to support it.
Right. I guess Sean and Mary Beth are going to lead the discussion at the beginning.
Yes, I think Sean is going to start the presentation.
Thank you for that, Ms. Otina. I do think, although this is a difficult conversation, I think the vibe this year is different. I feel like people are able to speak their minds and people are listening. And I said we have some difficult things to reason through, but I'm confident that we can do so in a productive and healthy way. Justin Evans and I attended the school committee meeting last week, and they were gracious enough to let us participate in their discussion as well. And they had some really powerful things to share about the school district and some of their struggles, and we were able to share a little bit about the town side as well. And I thought that was good. I really appreciated being there, and I know Justin does too. The superintendent's also here tonight with best staff and other school committee members, so we're lucky to have him here. I guess I'll just jump right into it, and we're gonna kind of go through the departments just quickly. I added that in there for the presentation, mostly so that you could, was hoping to get it out a little bit sooner than last Friday, so you have some time to digest this material. It's obviously very dense, but Mary Beth Carter and Kathy Keith have done a tremendous amount of work. Mike, at your request with the projection, it was a very difficult challenge. But Mary Beth Cotter is extremely thorough, and she's trying to be very precise with the numbers. And I think the product that we shared is something that that we can really stand behind. So we're better off because of it. So we'll start by going through each of the departments just to get a feel for a little bit of the history of how things came to be this way and a projection moving forward. We'll do that fairly quickly until we get really to the heart of the matter is, are we going to support a 1-year override, or should we support a multi-year, 3-year override? Good. First, you can see that the fire department, you can see the percentages on the right from fiscal 20 to fiscal year 28. So 26, 27, and 28. That's what we're projecting in those fiscal years. You can see the assumptions on the left for both salary and expense. You can see that they're pretty tight. So fire department looks pretty tight there as far as our projection. Go to the police department. See, similar on the right. And then you can see next year is a little bit of a bump. This is one specific department where we decided to fund a little bit of money with the override, contingent on the override, because of the safety concerns revolving around their continued need to fill shifts that are currently unfilled. See the DPW. With the expenses here, this is us trying to clean up some of the expenses as they're distributed throughout other departments having to do with maintenance. So we're taking money from other departments and we're increasing here. So there's actually a little bit of an offset that doesn't show there, but we're taking from other departments and including in this line just to clean it up. See the library. And technology. This will be the one other area that next year we're including a little bit of a bump. The risk concerns pertaining to this department affects all departments. So we thought for risk purposes, it made sense to increase this, again, contingent on the override, but with technology. You get to Whitman-Hanson Regional School District, you can see their numbers on the right, how it's progressed from fiscal year 20, and you can see their increases here. Remember, their increases look a little bit higher because as I skip ahead real quick to our next line, townwide expenses, you can see the Plymouth County retirement and the health insurance numbers are up closer to 10%. Remember that when you're looking at the regional school district and their numbers, their health insurance is, some of those costs are included in their budget line, where for our departments, they're not included. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then that takes us to the critical question. And we should have some discussion first before we hopefully reach some sort of consensus so that we can then structure the override. Should we support a 1-year override that's at about $2.4 million? That number is still a little bit fluid. Over the next week, we are fine-tuning things like revenue and still some aspect of expenses. So that's not a solid number, exactly 2.4. It might be like 2.375, in that general area, close to 2.4, and the same thing with the 3-year. It might be at about 4.2 million, or it might be just less than that. But I think that's pretty much the watermark of how high the 3-year would be. We're looking at some efficiencies right now that might come through that might bring that number down a little bit, but that would be the watermark of how high our 3-year would be. Does that make sense?
Anyone have any remarks or questions? Yes.
And I would just add to Sean sort of on the timing. He said it up front that we are hoping to get the decision tonight on 1-year versus 3-year. However, the amount that the select board votes to put on the ballot, we have to have settled by April 7th, which is going to be our next meeting when we set April meetings.
Right.
So we don't have to have the numbers exactly dialed in today, but we do have to have
Whether we're going to go 1 or 3.
exactly.
And
I actually have one small correction.
Yes.
I think I misspoke. It was not the facilities department, it's the DPW, and it was the trash. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Quick correction. If we're looking at the DPW, highways and parks, this increase is not because of maintenance. That has to do with the facilities department. This increase has to do with a trash rate. So we're predicted to have a trash rate that's a little bit higher, but when the trash rate is a little bit higher, we're bringing in a little bit more money on the revenue side, but we have to pay out a little bit more on the contract side. That's correct, right, Linda?
That's correct.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Kathy, has the Finance Committee had any discussion on the 1 versus 3?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
That's part of tonight's agenda. We finished our budget manager meetings last Tuesday night, and so that's all wrapped up. And the agenda for the Finance Committee tonight, when we adjourn to our meeting room, is to have a general discussion about the override, 1 year versus 3 year. We had some, I'd say, informal discussions, but there's no firm consensus.
Okay. Yes.
Bob Kimball, Lovinville Way. I just got one question. What's the difference between a 1 year override and a 3 year override? If we do a 1 year override for 2.4 million, does that mean, and we do a 3 year override for 4.25 million, does that mean the first year we can spend 2.4 additional? The second year we can spend another 1.3 additional. In the third year we spend additional? Just the logistics of it, please. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a good question. Yes.
Certainly. The 2.4 million is what we need for just this year. So if we have just the 1 year override, my fear is that next year we would need money as well. So if we go with the 4.25, which I believe is going to be a little less than that, that money, and I have a calculation here, that would give the town, it would all go on 1 year. So it's not a 3 year override. It's a single year override to cover us for 3 years. So it would go on into the tax levy calculation in fiscal year 26. Basically, what would happen is we would have excess levy, and we would leave that money on the table, and that would just roll into 27. And then we would have money that would roll into 28. So that would cover us for 3 years, as opposed to having 3 separate overrides. The 4.25 goes into the calculation as our base. We earn we can add 2.5% to that, and that's all on the 26. So from a fiscally responsible way, I think, would be to go for the one override that covers us for 3 years. Also, just so you know, if it were the 4.25, all that would be taxed, and I don't mean that in a minor, I don't want to underscore that, but would be the 2.4 million in fiscal 26. And then that excess revenue, the excess levy capacity would roll into 27. We would use out of that what we needed. There'd be an additional tax from there, and then the residual would fall in the third year. So it's not like 4.25 million would go into the taxes for fiscal year 26. So the way we broke this down, it looks like the first year we would need, say, 2,262,000. It would be an impact of $421.49 to the taxpayer. Now, that's based on the average single-family home, which is $495,736.78. And then the following year would be based on the 26, although we don't have that average single-family home yet. So the calculations are all done on the fiscal 25 average single home. The additional money that would flow into 27 was looking like $370 for that second year, and then the third year, $198. Now, this was all done before we made a few tweaks even this morning, a couple of things were changed. We did learn from the DPW that the solid waste, which is a large ticket item in our budget, is projected to go up 6%. So today, the accountant's office added the revenue side because the cost is going up, the fees that we'll be charging will be going up. So they added that revenue in. The other thing that we did is we accounted for the $200,000 that we want to use out of free cash for the pension, Plymouth County pension liability, for the next few years until that unfunded liability is completely paid. It was supposed to be paid in 2029. They pushed it out to 2030. I wouldn't be surprised if it got extended one more year. But this evening, I am presenting a free cash policy that clearly states that we want to take $200,000 out of our free cash every year for the next few years until we see the light at the end of the tunnel, but until that unfunded liability is paid off. So when we added that in, and also $140,000 from free cash to be used towards our OPEB costs, those changed some of these calculations. Go ahead.
So basically, if you look at the slides and the 3-year projection, if we go with the 1-year override, we're going to be short next year. And we'll be short the year after. But the theory, at least the argument I'm making is, do we ask for a relatively small amount of money with higher chances of receiving that money, knowing that we're going to be a little bit short and we're going to have to be tight, but that the override might pass, a high degree that it might pass? Or do we ask for more money, which is more in line with our projection, which will then fund us out for about 3 years, but it's a risk that it may not pass? Like Duxbury's just didn't pass. Duxbury just had an override that didn't pass, but they were including additional services in their override. So it's a 3-year override for about close to $5 million, but they were including new services in their override. Ours doesn't include any new services, not from the town side, and as far as I know, not from the school side at all. It's really just to sustain. So it's a difficult decision. A smaller override that isn't quite enough, we know we're going to have to cut, or a bigger override that would sustain us 3 years.
Carl, if I could just,
Yes.
yeah. And so I know I've been the one preaching the 3-year override. I think my biggest concern is, Sean obviously makes a good political argument. I mean, this is a decision that the voters are going to have to make, is probably more palatable with a smaller number. I think that the financial operability, the concern that I have is, it is difficult for us to recruit candidates for town positions as is, hiring full-time staff. And if there's a concern that we're going to be cutting the budget every year for the next 3 years, makes it even more difficult. And I would hate to go through this exercise. If there were successful override, if the voters come out and say, yes, we want to continue funding services the way they are, turn around next year and cut those same services back down. So that's kind of where I'm coming at from this. If we're going to ask, let's ask for the one that will sustain us for a couple of years, make a very clear pitch. These are the service levels now. We're going to raise the levy incrementally. We're not going to hit you with 4.2 at once. It'll be 2.4 this year, 5 next year, and 4.25 the following year, something around there. And here's the projected tax increases throughout that. It would require probably more explanation on our part, but I think it is the more sound fiscal policy.
Okay, right, now overrides are forever, right? Unless you do an underround. So if we do a 3-year override, what is the tax rate going to be in the 3rd year per house? I mean, if we raise the tax rate, how is it, what is ours now, 7 or 8?
13.12.
What is it?
13.12.
All right, 13.12.
Yeah.
If we raise the tax rate to 15, we'll say, won't that bring the money in? Is that considered the override?
It's effectively how it works. Is we can't raise taxes more than
2.5%.
2.5%, but it's of the property value. So as the property values go up, we're effectively lowering the tax rate to
Right.
not increase revenues by the levy by more than 2.5%
So-
year over year.
What I'm saying is, if it's a 3-year rate, we theoretically are raising the tax rate per household. On the 4th year, or the 5th year, if we do it, say a 3-year, and the 4th year, does the tax rate go down?
No.
It stays that height. So it's forever. Unless we
Oh, it
do,
is forever.
unless we do an underwrite.
I guess one key difference that both Mary Beth and Justin had hit on, but it is kind of hard to understand. It's not that if we go for the 3-year override, it isn't that we're going to borrow 4.5 million in the first year, and then that's going to sustain us for the next 3 years. We're going to ask for the ability to borrow 4.5 or whatever, but we're only going to borrow 2.4 and then incrementally more and more. Does that make sense?
Not borrow, tax.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
I just came from the middle school building committee, so I borrow in my time too. Mike?
Kathy,
No, I'm sorry, it's just gonna grab him.
Maybe just leave that, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mike?
So I
So-
just wanted to address Mr. Salvucci. You're absolutely correct. After 3 years, that's the new rate. I guess the challenge really comes down to what's the palatability of how we go about this. We could do 3 yearly increments or 1 3-year increment. The end result is the same, realistically, right? The tax rate will be 3 years higher in 3 years. The challenge that I see here is what's the town's and the taxpayers' stomach for 3 separate votes to override as opposed to 1. I think that's our crux, is to understand, and probably part of our educational part on this is it's kind of the same thing. It's just how do we go about it? The singular 3-year does make sense in the fact that if we get it done, we don't have to come back and ask for an override for the next 2 years. It gets us through that period. It does leave us another option, of course, which is if the town decides that they do not want that, we still can go back to the 1 year. It is a possibility. And I think we have to keep that in mind as well, that we have a fallback, but we don't really have a fallback if we go for the 1. If we fail at the 1, we're not getting the 3. So I'm kind of with you on this, Justin. I think the 3 is probably more overall fiscally responsible for us. And then, of course, we have to maintain the numbers
Correct.
that we've done and should prove that our projections are reasonable and correct outside of craziness that happens in the world.
I think it all depends on controlling department budgets. That's simple. Right? I mean, if you throw more money into the pot, are they going to spend more? They can't. They have to control their budget.
I think it's hard. If the taxpayers see a $4.25 million override, and they know that we have 3 huge capital things going on right now. We got the DPW, the Whitman Middle School, and the South Shore Tech. And then they see another $4.25 million on the ballot.
Right.
I don't think they're going to push for it. And not only that, it's who to say 2 years from now we don't have more revenue. Don't we have a marijuana dispensary coming in soon? And
yeah, but
and I look
we've been
around.
waiting for that for a
Yeah,
couple
I
of
know.
years.
But when you look around the surrounding towns, everyone is looking for an override right now. Everyone is in a jam right now. Maybe the state within the next couple of years can loosen up some money because they see all this, and maybe give us some more funding, and that will even bring more money to the towns. So I'm going for a 3-year compared to I'd rather go with the 1 year, and then maybe deal with it. Next year maybe we're getting more money from the state. Maybe we're getting more revenue from the marijuana dispensary, stuff like that.
Okay, Mike.
Okay, I got another question. If, say that happens, and we say we have a 3-year, and the revenue comes in, and we have we have enough revenue on the books that we end up dropping the household, the tax rate? Or do we open it up and let departments get all their wants instead of their needs? That's my only concern. Everybody needs to learn to control the budget, whether it's your household or running a department. It's that simple. And I don't want to have a pot full of cash saying, well, marijuana came in, and we got all this extra money, but we got the override, and we got extra money there. Let's just go for it. I don't want that. I want people, departments to control their budget, just like the average household does.
But these budgets on the, here are very lean budgets.
Yeah.
They're
Oh, I know.
There's no
Right.
wants, like extra things. I mean, our drivers here that are out of our control are really the medical insurance, the pension liability, solid waste costs. I mean, things that we don't have control over. The other departments and their costs, I mean, they are very lean right now. Sean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like, we've been very careful. I think one of the fundamental principles that's really influenced me on helping to build this budget is, if we're going to ask people to sacrifice, we need to show how we're sacrificing. And they could talk to any one of the department heads, and the department heads could clearly say the ways in which the departments are sacrificing. We're not being crazy with the money at all. I feel like we're being very tight and very careful and trying to be very conscientious about the taxpayer and the situation they're in. That's why I kind of think if we went with the 1 year, I do think that people would appreciate that we're trying to be as small as possible. But I hear your arguments too about the 3 year. It's a difficult decision.
Mary
Justin?
Oh, sorry.
Just a question. If you could spell it out, Mary, what was it? Mary Beth, sorry. The actual cost over the 3 year period is what? Roughly $1,000 per household.
Oh.
Roughly 400 some of the first year. Second year is a little less.
So we did run some numbers here just on the different amounts. It looks like the 2.4 million had an overall cost for the average household of $447.20. A 3.5 million or 3,750,000 had a cost of $698,075. So if your house is more, it's going to cost more. If it's less, it's going to be lower. And then a 4.25 million had a cost here of $791.92.
It's right up on the screen.
Up here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
John.
Yes, John.
John Galvin, High Street. I think that slide is extremely misleading because that 791, if we do a 4.25, isn't going to hit the tax bills next year. It's going to be spread out over 3 years.
That's right.
So the 3 year override at 4.2 million next year, or going into fiscal 26, it's the exact same tax impact as the 2.5. It's exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
So next year, if we did the 3 year, it's the same as, the only difference is that 791, some of that gets added on the next year, and so it gets spread out. That's a little misleading because it says it'll all hit in that 1 year, and it won't. It gets spread over 3 years.
Right. That's why you might want to point that out.
Well, thank you.
Educate the townspeople and taxpayers. Might be a little bit easier to stomach it.
Carl, I just had I went back on the DOR has great resources for going back on historic override votes. The town of Whitman has sought an override 15 times since Prop 2.5 passed. It was successful in 2013 for a school override for $440,000, and in 2018 for a public safety override, the fire department added increased shifts to 6 men per shift for $310,000. So 15 times we've tried, we've been successful twice.
But how much?
$310,000 in 2018 and $440,000.
Well, that's nothing. We're looking at 2-point-something million.
13. Yeah, this would be the largest operational override we've ever sought, even on the low end.
Kathy?
Well, the fact of the matter is, those of us who eat, breathe, and sleep these numbers know you can't squeeze any more out of it. You're going to start looking, and 90% of the costs are salaries. So you're going to be squeezing personnel out of different departments. We haven't voted on the budgets yet. We will. We'll discuss tonight, and we'll discuss again next Tuesday and the following Tuesday and make our votes. But the only way around this is to increase the levy limit. It doesn't mean that you're increasing the appropriation to the levy limit. But if you increase the levy limit by 4.25 by a vote this year, we're not going to spend 4.25, we're going to spend 2.4, whatever the deficit turns out to be. So, but that gives us permission next year to go up by whatever the deficit so-called is. And I know Mary Beth and Kathy have projected something like, we've got the 3-year projections. And the reason the 3-year override scenario makes sense is that if we don't go for a 4.25 levy limit increase, we're going to be going to the voters year after year for override permission. And if they say no, every year it's going to be squeezed so that there's nothing. And we don't want to do that. This is a beautiful little town with dedicated employees. Nobody is over budgeted. They just aren't. There are people who've asked for more, and we're going to be saying no, or we're going to be recommending no. But they're not outrageous requests. In a perfect world, we would say yes. It's a perfectly reasonable request, but we just don't have the wherewithal this year. So I think this educational process is important. The message has to be understood by those who do not sleep with these numbers, dream about these numbers, wake up in the middle of the night, say, what can I do to get another $100,000 out of the budget? So it's an educational process at this point in time. And you can see there's 8 of us who will have a discussion later tonight about 3 versus 1. And I agree with you, Mike, that it's 4.25 is a hard pill to swallow unless the information is delivered to the taxpayers, voters, in a way that makes it clear that will be 3 years from now. The levy limit will be up, the levy appropriation will be up to the 4.2 unless more money comes in, unless new revenue is found, unless the major developments come in that generate more revenue so that we don't have to put it on the taxpayers, or we can spread it out across a bigger tax base. So there'll be new taxpayers spreading out the cost of running this town so that the individual taxpayers actually end up, I'm not going to say saving, but not being hit by the increases that it looks like right now. So increasing revenue is something that will just mitigate how much is actually appropriated for the purposes of funding the services.
Yes.
With some of that said, what's the guarantee that if we feel if we have some revenue coming in, what's the guarantee that if something happens, like we need something big, that we don't raise that levy all the way up for that extra money? What's the guarantee that we're going to stick to what we're saying, the 2.5, the 1.3, and whatever else after? Because I think some people might be worried if we're giving the town the ability to tax up to that rate. Well, even if things are going good, even if we're getting more revenue, what if something happens, we need something big? What if the state stops funding some more of the school department's mandates? And the ability there is say, okay, we'll just raise it up. Is there any guarantee that we can be tight and fiscally responsible going forward?
That's the word, fiscally responsible. That is the word.
We make recommendations to town meetings, so maybe it would get more people out to vote at town meeting and be more invested in what's going on with the budget than having a handful of people making the decision, and then those who don't show up at town meeting complain about the decision. Well, don't complain if you don't vote.
Yeah, and ultimately, we can't spend what town meeting doesn't give us permission to spend.
So if they give us permission to raise it up to that 3-year rate, and we say, all right, next year, we're only going to raise it up this much.
Even next year, we'd still have to get permission for what we put on Article 2. You know what I mean?
Just by Article 2, about presenting a budget.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, there'd be 2 components. It would be what's appropriated at town meeting to spend in a given year, and then when we set the tax rate later in the year, fill out the recap sheet. There's only a little bit of movement you can do there on revenue projections and whatnot, but those are the 2 places where you could potentially change how much of that you're spending.
So we'd bump up our ability to tax, but town meeting really is the vote that appropriates the money. So ultimately we'd have to go in front of town meeting next year.
Like Kathy said, hopefully there'll be more townspeople coming out and learning and finding out what's going on and taking part in the process, because like you said, for the people that aren't happy with the way things go, it's easy to complain, but I always say, come on down to town meeting, get informed, and make your vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but we were hoping to make a decision tonight about either a 1-year or a 3-year. We have to it's kind of important that we make the decision sooner rather than later. Could we hold off till Monday? I mean, till the 7th?
The 7th is when the ballot question needs to appear on the agenda that goes out the Thursday before. So we just need to, and I,
What if we had a meeting, next Tuesday?
sure. I mean, we could always, too, put two ballot questions on the agenda and then just decide.
But not on the ballot.
No. On the agenda, and then decide at that meeting.
Just pass over it.
Right, we just, whatever the consensus was then, we could, and I believe that with some of the adjustments that were done today, that it is going to be, to carry us through 3 years, less than the 4.250. So that's good news, but it is just the ability to tax up to that, and you would not be taxed more than what is needed for the deficit for fiscal '26. The rest of that capacity carries over to the following year, and then we would use whatever was left there that we needed for '27, and then it would flow into '28. So it's giving us the ability to tax.
An honest answer to whomever asked, can we give you an answer right now, is no. We need to talk, and that's our number one agenda item. It's probably going to be the only thing we talk about tonight, is 1 year versus 3 years. I did send out Mary Beth's 3-year projected override spreadsheet to the committee over the weekend, and directed there, go to line 310, go to column S, go to tab revenue. So I've been working with this, sleeping, not as much as Mary Beth, but close. So I know the information backwards and forwards, but I need my committee members to have the time to talk, discuss, and we can text you later on, Mary Beth, and tell you, or Carl, tell you what our decision is, or we've come to a consensus, but right now there's no answer for you.
How long do you think it's going to take you to do that?
So no later than 8:30, because we all like to go home by then.
So do we.
90 minutes is about as much as our brains can handle.
All right, yes, Sean.
I think we should offer the opportunity for the schools to give us some feedback. I think it does obviously impact those guys for 1 year or 3 year. If you would like to give some feedback about your preference, I think it'd be good to hear from you. Yeah.
Again, thanks for the invite. Pardon I'm draining, haven't been feeling well. So our preference, and I'm going to speak for the school committee, I think we've looked at that 5-year plan through fiscal '28, and your 3-year override covers us. And I think the numbers that Stephen provided, Mary Beth, puts us in a really good spot. Beth and George Farrow and Nikki Schneeweiss attended the House Ways and Means meeting yesterday, and there's some movement from the state looking at Chapter 70. I don't see it happening in fiscal '26, but we've talked about projections over. Maybe there will be some revenues coming back that way, and if the override does carry us through and there's excess revenues, I do think there can be some movement that the school's not going to drain the fund. I think the numbers that we have presented are pretty solid. We were looking at this year being our worst fiscal year for FY '26. There's going to be some movement in retirements over the next 2 fiscal years, so that gives us some flexibility. So the numbers I think that we provided Mary Beth are pretty concrete, and that would be our preference, to not have to come back to the table every year worrying if we're going to, as Justin said, lay off the good people that we're going to hire if we do. And that's the problem that we have right now. Is keeping people, and there's not a lot of folks that want to teach, especially in some areas of special education, and those needs are up. And I've had 2 people quit in the past 2 months, leaving the profession. So if the stability is there, if we can offer that stability, I think would be a good place to be.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thanks.
Yes.
Bob Kimball again. You people have done a great job. I might not agree with everything, but I think you've done a really good job. My question is, if we go for the 3-year override, in the question for the town meeting, can we put in that the first year we would only spend a certain amount of percentage, the second year we spend the next amount of percentage, and the third year the final percentage? That way the people on town meeting floor who know where the money's going, because there's always a possibility that next year or even in the fall, we have a special town meeting and we use up all this revenue. So I'm just concerned about that.
That's a good point, thank you. I want to make sure I have something right. On the, when you were giving the effect on the average household for the 1 year, isn't the effect on the average household for the 1 year the same as it would be for the 3 year?
In the first year, yeah.
In the first year?
Year.
In other words, in the first year, it's going to be the same.
Correct. Whether it's a 4,250,000 or 2,400,000, we're going to use out of the total capacity that we have enough to close the deficit in fiscal '26. So the impact in '26 would be the same for either.
Whether
one.
it's a 3 year or a 1 year.
That's correct.
That's an important point
That's
there,
correct.
out there.
What it does is it leaves excess levy capacity on the table. And we've talked about this in the past, tax to the levy. We don't want a tax to the levy. We're purposely leaving that for the following year. But by putting the 4.25 in fiscal '26 as the override amount, instead of breaking it up in 3 overrides, you're getting the 2.5% increase on that 4,250,000. And I do believe that the final number will be lower than that to carry us 3 years.
Thank you, thank you.
And the fourth year, and what happened the fourth year, it's tax, we'll go with that higher money coming in, right?
Correct.
Fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh.
Right.
Well,
Sean?
I was hoping someone would make a motion tonight, but since that's not going to happen, I actually think it is appropriate, before we make the decision, that we do talk a little bit about the contingency budget, because understanding the risk of the override, I think, is actually a big factor in the size and scope of the override. So, Maribeth, do you want to address that, or do you want?
Sure.
Well, maybe just quickly, we're meeting with the budget working group, which includes Ms. Sotina and John Galvin, a member at large, and the two of us and Justin and Mr. Lynham, former town administrator for a long time, so extremely knowledgeable. And we've been going back and forth with different formulas. The initial revenue formula that I had proposed, it didn't really, there's something about it that doesn't quite pass the muster. There's something about it that's a little bit off. So we decided to move away from that. So there are multiple proposals that were then presented by Justin, by John, and myself. We had a really good discussion and came up with a compromise that kind of is in the middle of the two of them. We're still working out the fine details, but basically we kind of have it narrowed down for if the override was to fail in 26, whether it's the 3 year or the 1 year, the 26 budget, what would it look like, the contingency? And this is what we got.
Right. So on the town side, we were looking at cutting $1,081,336. However, when we start to make the cuts and we're cutting employees, we have to add in 36 to 40% for unemployment costs. So then you have to cut further to make up that difference. So that's what I spent today doing after we had our meeting last night and came up with the figure. And I will just say in general terms, if the override fails, we will be cutting police, fire, DPW, town hall, staff, council on aging will be affected. And I put in, it's a large number, closing the library, which kills me to even say that. However, that is like 489,000. And when I'm looking at $1,081,000 plus the unemployment costs, and that's where we are today. And I got the number down where I needed it to be. But just to see what we had to do to devastate, the town departments to get there was difficult. So
$1 million out of the town budget is a big deal.
I would sell that, Mary Beth. You sell that at town meeting, sell that. You almost have to, because you're investing in it's going to cost you.
And the other, sorry, Mary.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The other side of the story is the schools will have to make cuts. And it's not that we're imposing it. We know that you do the assessment. We know the rules. But you're also reasonable human beings, and you know that we can't pay a bill without money that we don't have in the bank. So I went to Jeff's proposal from last year. What if we use E&D plus circuit breaker, plus not replace 5 teachers. And we managed to get through last year's budget, fiscal 26, fiscal 25, without anybody losing their job. But then Jeff had scenarios, and it's available on their website. If we go to the next level of cuts, and the next level of cuts, and the next level of cuts. So that information is out there. At one point, the maximum level of cuts, which is the magnitude we're talking about here, like $1 million, turned into like 20 to 25 employees, teachers, in a very tight budget. Nothing has been added. There's no new programs. So both sides, both the municipal and the schools, and I think we're all one big happy family, but the big budget is the schools. They will take a significant hit. And so if you want to know what would happen to the schools, I'm not speaking for Jeff, but he told us last year what was going to be on the table, and I don't think it's going to change significantly. There's no place to go but people. There really isn't.
Yeah, it's terrible. And you asked how many of
Personnel,
each.
you say personnel from the fire and police?
Well, this is ebbing and flowing, but originally I had 2 police and 2 fire, and that may be 1 from each and a couple more from DPW, so.
It's not just as simple as X amount of salary and one individual. It affects a whole bunch of things like how many they have on a shift and that kind of stuff. So logistically, it isn't just as easy as saying 1, 2, and then correlate with money. So it's something that we know it's going to be, if you had to put a rough number to it, it's about $80,000 an employee that you save, but you also have to put back in for unemployment, right? And it's not that you can't just take one employee from the fire department off a shift because it just doesn't work that way logistically. So, and there are other logistical questions about the DPW if you would, how that impacts their daily operation. So it's not quite as simple, but this is the terribleness that Mary Beth's going to have to go through over the next, or we're going to have to help her with over the next couple weeks, because it is a nightmare if you have to come up with all that money and thinking about the operational side of each department.
And yes, Beth.
Beth Stafford, 21 Harvard Street, also chair of the school committee. And Sean, thank you for saying a couple words that you said about, I just want to say a few more things about what the schools are a little bit different from the other town departments. We have a lot of mandated requirements that we have to pay. And those mandates seem to go up every year and impact us more than, just not having the money. The funding doesn't come through the way we want it to. We're supposed to be 100% reimbursed for busing. I think it was once that all the years that we've been regionalized that it came in at 100%. Every year, we never know what to budget for because we always try to lower the budget because we don't know what's coming. Our health, as you said, your health care is with you. We're a municipality, Whitman Hanson. So we have our own health care. We have our own OPEB. We have our own retirements. We have all of that is in our budget. So when we have cuts, it is really tough for us too because of what we're mandated, the special needs programs that we have to have, the EL students that we have to have, and we have to have X amount of teachers and tutors for those children. We have to provide early intervention children for the preschool, and we have to match those students with a, quote, regular education student. So all these are mandated, and it's when we talk about cuts, we're talking about at least 14, which means 21 because of the unemployment for our budget. And, that is, of course, class size. It is loss of teachers. There's just no other way to do it. We are, as was stated, we have no new programs. It's the same that we had. We had a couple new pathways, but those were all by grants. And now with the federal government, we have almost, it's $1.5 million of federal grants. 1.8. If the federal government decides they're not going to do grants anymore, then we're even that much more in the hole. So, that's a big concern that we have that, some of the town departments might not have. So, it's going to hit all of us. And that's why we all need to be a team because its impact, it's a big impact for the whole town. And I think everybody needs to understand that, because if this doesn't go through, this town's going to be not what it used to be. Let's put it that way. So.
Thank you, Beth. Yes.
I just want to point out, none of these scenarios we're laying out, whether it's a 4-year or 3-year, effective numbers are seen on the board right now. That's our increases over the next 4 years. Whichever way we go, and if we do not hit those numbers, and what Mary Beth said as far as cuts, they just come earlier or later in that scenario. So as we're considering what the options are, we are not, as the school just said, we're not adding any services. We're not adding any bodies. We're just maintaining exactly what we have today. That's the price of what we have to pay to maintain what we have today. And I think that's another important part to make sure everybody understands. I don't want to pay that. I'm sure nobody in the room wants to pay that, right? But the fact is, we've heard what some of the impact of not keeping up with the fact that the world costs more every year is going to hit this town. We have to keep that in mind.
I would like to hear from one of the department heads if they're willing. Chief Clancy or Chief Hanlon, if you're willing to give some feedback. If not, it's okay.
That actually, I think they did say they were going to give the police.
Good evening, Chief Clancy, I'm the fire chief. Just a brief statement. I was unaware of any of these numbers until just coming in here tonight. I'll tell you, one of the things that our budget is dramatically impacts on the services we can provide to this community. Each and every day, those members of this fire department provide great services to this town, whether it's fire, EMS, or even through the emergency management when we have the big storms and stuff. They go out of their way, much like everybody else, all the other departments in here. We're not staffed to where we need to be. We all know that. I rely on callback. I rely on people coming from home to fill in extra pieces of apparatus to send it out the door. I don't know that we'll ever be fully staffed, but I will point out in 2017, went into effect FY28, the town did pass an override for 4 firefighter paramedics. If I was to lose those, we go back to staffing in the 1970s, and that's shameful. That'll be shameful. I'll have to take an ambulance out of service, which has a magnitude of problems because I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but it comes through sometimes. You better hope you're the first emergency because I'm not 100% sure I'll be able to put anybody from Whitman Fire at your house if you have an emergency or a fire. Might be a small issue, they'll turn into a big issue, and that results in other problems as we move down the road. I strongly will work with you, we'll see what we can do, we'll sit down and work on it. But, I feel that the townspeople spoke to have 6. If we don't have 6, there's other ramifications, we'll go into other meetings, but there's a lot of trickle-down effects, like Sean, you said. It's just not laying one person off. It's 2, and then it's 3, and then it's 4, and then we get back to the staffing that we were at in the 70s. And this is not, much like Mrs. Stafford said, this is not the same town as it was in the 1970s, and we need every single person to provide those services to this community that they've grown to expect, need, and most importantly, deserve.
Thank you, Chief. Chief.
Chief Hanlon, Police Department. Sean, could I get you to come up here and just dial back to Police Department, if you wouldn't mind? I'm just going to make a couple comments related to that. So if you look there is a negative 1.68 and a negative 1.3% in FY20 and 21. Those happen to be my first 2 years as chief. And so the issue there was we weren't able to fill all of our shifts. And I've explained this to the board here and as well as the school committee. And over the years, as you can see from those numbers, going year to year, we're trying to manage that as well as we can. We're still not there yet, and so that's why I repeatedly ask for an additional amount of money. And like I said, we're getting there, but every year I have to come back and ask for more than a 4.23 or a 6.12. It's probably double that, and it gets dialed back every year on the budget side. As far as how that relates to what the officers do, the officers on the Whitman Police Department when they have to respond and they don't have the right resources, that adds stress to an already stressful situation. And I'm sure that's the same with the fire department. And what ends up happening is they're unable to perform the services to the level that this town is accustomed to. And so that puts more stress on them. They get frustrated, and we're not able to successfully do our mission. What does that turn into? That makes us all feel fearful of what's going to happen should we have to go to that next call. It's going to come. I just don't know when it is. That's why they're emergencies. We respond to them as best we can. The issue is you're going to put them in fear, and also, as Chief Clancy said, we're not going to be able to respond appropriately, and then bad things happen when that occurs. So prior to this meeting, I looked through, the budget impacts and wrote something out in 2020, and it still holds true today, and probably from previous chiefs. You want to get to that service that everyone is safe. I want everyone to be safe. The officers want everybody to be safe. I'm sure the townspeople want to be safe. And we've done a pretty good job of that with what we've done, even with the minus 1.68 that you see up there. We're just trying to rebuild back to that. And of course, it hasn't been fully completed yet. And so that's why in FY26, as Sean mentioned in the earlier presentations, that's why that number is a little bit higher for us than it normally would be, because we get kicked back in 20 and 21. So anyone have any questions on any of that?
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Do you have a preference on 1 or 3 years for the override?
I said earlier,
Answer finance.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I thought I heard it mentioned that, the more fiscally responsible scenario is to go for a 3-year. And so that's where I would lean. Something is better than nothing. I understand that philosophy. But if you don't ask for it, you're never going to get it. So if you don't ask for the 3, you're not going to get the 3. If you ask for the 1, it puts us right back into the same position all over again, potentially in the following years. They're still going to be lean, or we're going to do another override. And, maybe an all or nothing, but I think from the way you've presented it, the 3-year is the way to go, in my opinion, anyway.
Thank you, Chief.
Just to reiterate, I think I understand where you're coming from, Sean. I think the 3-year is, this hangs over us every year. Everybody in this room understands that we deal with this every year. Not to this magnitude, but we deal with it everywhere. I think the 3-year override will give us the opportunity to catch our breath, keep our services where they need to be, and also recruit the talented people that we need to bring into our departments. If this looms over them, we have an open spot now. I think it would be difficult. We have a hiring freeze, but I think it would be difficult at the moment to bring in a new recruit thinking they're going to have a 34-year career here. You might get laid off next year. That's not going to attract long-term employees that want to come and serve this community like the ones we have now.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah,
Any last thoughts? Yes.
I think the schools had similar feedback, so that's good enough for me to hear. I'll support the 3-year for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Starting to lean that way, Kathy.
Well, we need to talk among ourselves.
I know. Just a question. We can get a text from you, once you finish your meeting. Would it work to have a meeting next week?
Sure.
Just to discuss whether we want to do 1 or 3, and that'll give you a week to get it ready for the 7th meeting. On the other hand, what we'd be asking you to do is to come up with a valid question for 1 and a valid question for 2, and then we throw away the work on one of them.
I have the
On the
ballot
7th.
question, I already,
You do, both of them.
it's the same ballot question, I just
Yeah,
put it fill
just the
in the
money.
amount.
All right.
So I had council do that.
To Bob Kimball's question earlier, I just looked up Duxbury's ballot question. They did ask for the full 5.8 on the question to give the town permission to raise that money, even though within the town meeting, the budget only appropriated an extra 1.7, I think it was the first year. So yes, town meeting would make it clear that there's a distinction with what you're raising, but the ballot question has to give you the full ability to raise it.
I was just thinking on the town meeting floor itself.
Yeah.
When you vote override, to put a percentage in there. I know the state
requires a full amount. But
If I could finish my thought. So you're comfortable with us waiting until the 7th to do it?
That's the drop dead date, the 7th, so I can get it to the clerk before the 10th. So yes, the 7th, the ballot question.
Okay, so we can
That
vote on it
works.
on the 7th. We'll have 2 weeks to go over what you said.
You'll have our information later tonight. I believe you'll have it.
Thank you very much.
It's very productive.
Thank you. Take it.
Okay, haven't reached 7 o'clock. It's time for a public meeting with respect to the application of Anava Inc. And there's a name here. Is Mikolai here? How do you pronounce your name?
Nikolai Dixeno.
Say the second one again?
Nikolai
Yes, that's the first name, right? Second name.
Dixeno.
Okay, Nikolai. To increase the number of vehicles for sale on the premises located at 845 Temple Street from 40 vehicles to 70 vehicles. Would you like to tell us why you want to do that?
Hi, guys. I'm the famous Sparky. I own 845 Temple Street.
Okay.
Nick has been my tenant for about a year and a half. He initially got the 40-car license that I held that I never really took advantage of. And he has done really well and taken great advantage of it, and he's very successful. I think if you check, all his reviews are positive. Some of you may have even bought a car from him. We run a nice, clean place. It's a pretty tight ship. And I think he deserves to do better and expand.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to, Sparky, I was at your place today, walked around, saw your mechanic. And I will approve this increase. I think there's plenty of room. I walked the grounds. I have purchased a vehicle from the gentleman, or my son did. So I know that, he's a good business, represents the town as a good business. So, as I say, I walked the area.
No, actually, the building inspector came out, and we have like approval for 55 cars already, with 18 spaces for employees and customers, and there's more than enough for me to run my business on one side and him to have 75 cars.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, is there a motion to allow the vehicles to go from 40 to 70?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great night.
Chairman's report. The only thing I want to report is just to announce to people that there is going to be a meeting of Whitman, Hanson, Will on the evening of the 8th at 6 o'clock at the high school. It includes dinner. And if you haven't been to a meeting of Whitman, Hanson, Will, it would really do you good to see what they do. You'll meet a number of very bright and students and some really dedicated staff, and they do a great job as far as dealing with substance use. So I didn't remind you at this point or announce that there's a meeting on the 8th at Whitman Hanson. New business, act to renew the taxi livery license and taxi livery driver's certificates for the period April 1st to 2025 through March 31st, 2026, subject to receipt of all required paperwork and license fees for the following. Eric Young, doing business as Sleipnir Transportation at 8 Danica Drive. Edward Jurgis, doing business as Faro Limo Services, 15 Hilltop Road. Marie Fries, doing business as All Star Transports, 56 Fiston Street. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Act on the request of Michael Ganchard on behalf of Whitman and Hanson Dollars for Scholars to declare April as Dollars for Scholars Month.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Act on the request of Michael Ganchard on behalf of Whitman Hanson Dollars for Scholars to erect a fundraising thermometer on the town hall lawn from April through the end of May.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Act on the recommendation of the Council of Aging to appoint Karen Huxham to the position of member for a 3-year term through June 30th, 2027, in order to fill an existing vacancy.
Oh, yeah. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the request of Deacon Paul Bredmore for a 1-day liquor license on Sunday, May 18th, 2025, between the hours of 5 and 9 p.m. for a first mass celebration for a newly ordained priest and to waive the fee for said permit. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye. Strictly wine.
Next item on the agenda. Warrant for the payment to Joanne Wing for work performed in the assessor's office. Mary Beth.
Okay. And I'll just pass this down just for you to look at, but I'd like to seek approval for a warrant in the amount of $240 to Joanne Wing. Joanne was a former assessor's office employee who is now retired for work performed in the assessor's office on January 28th of 2025. On January 23rd, 2025, the Board of Assessors sent a letter to Ms. Wing offering to pay her $40 per hour as a temporary independent contractor for work in the assessor's office until the full-time vacant union position was filled. A timesheet for 6 hours worked on the 28th was submitted along with a warrant for payment in the amount of $240 to the town accountant on March 11th. But to date, this invoice has not been paid. The assessors were not authorized to contract out bargaining unit work without the Select Board and the OPEIU Local 6 union approval. Both the Board of Assessors and Ms. Wing have been notified to cease and desist from engaging in any work related to this position unless or until it's approved by the Select Board and the union. So this is a one-time exception to have this invoice approved and paid. We want Joanne to be paid. She put in the time, and I request that the board just vote to authorize this payment, which I'll submit to the accountant next week.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any questions or any discussion? So we're paying her for work that she did,
Correct.
even though it was in a way unauthorized.
That's right, but she deserves to be paid.
It's not her fault.
In the past, if we've wanted to hire a temp person to assist while a union position is vacant, what's that process supposed to look like?
So that would come to the Select Board. The Select Board is over all of the unions. We would contact the union, and they would do some sort of an MOU or something with the union because it is union work. They're part of the bargaining unit, so we just can't go outside.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Acts to appoint the following members to the Whitman Aid to the Elderly and Disabled Taxation Fund Committee. This is what we discussed at the last meeting. John Noska, Chairman of the Board of Assessors. Sharon Lapicchio, Interim Treasurer Collector. John Galvin, Citizen Volunteer. Ryan Tressel, Citizen Volunteer. Ken Layler, Citizen Volunteer. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the request of Mary Joyce on behalf of the Whitman Historical Commission for permission to use the Town Hall Auditorium on Sunday, April 6th at 2 p.m. and Sunday, May 4th, 2025 at 2 p.m. in order to host 2 conversations along with the Historical Society of Abington relative to Whitman breaking away from the town of Abington. This is in conjunction with Whitman's 150th anniversary celebration. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor of the rebels?
Aye.
Annual Town Meeting Warrant Article Code of Ethics. Mary Beth.
Yes, so I received a request for an article for the town meeting warrant. However, that needs to go by the bylaw study committee. So I would like to request permission from the select board to put it forth for consideration to the bylaw study committee.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you.
Approve the town meeting warrant. Mary Beth.
Nope, we're just going to pass over that one for now, if we
What?
could. Pass over
Yep.
that if we could.
Yep. set the April meeting schedule? We have a meeting on the 7th.
Monday, the 7th,
Monday the
which is
7th.
different.
To accommodate our attorney who can't be here on a Tuesday. And what would be the second meeting, folks? Any thoughts?
We're getting into that town meeting, have to vote the warrant deadline. Logistical question for Mary Beth. We only have an annual, not a special, so we just need 7 days to post it.
That's correct.
So I would suggest the 22nd to give us 13 days.
Okay, so we'll meet on the 7th and on the 22nd.
At 7?
Pardon me?
At 7 o'clock?
Yes. Okay, old business, update, 150th Anniversary Committee. That might be why you're here?
Might be.
Might be.
I'm not here to speak about the breakup between Whitman and North Whitman. I mean, that would be Abington.
You're calling it a breakup, you're not calling it a revolution.
Can I close this thing?
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the board. On a lighter note, I'm here to discuss and update the townspeople regarding the 150th anniversary. So as you all know, the kickoff dinner is a week from Saturday, April 5th, at the Cardinal Spellman Center. Tickets are not available at the door. So if anybody wants tickets, which are $50 a piece, or we will reserve a table of 8 or 10, we have Instagram, email, all that stuff. Or if it's really simple, just call me at my office and I'll give it, or I'll deliver them to you. It doesn't matter. Just, we want to make it easy for people. So that's April 5th. And then Sunday, the 27th of April, we're going to do the burial of the time capsule on the front lawn out here. I've talked to the DPW and they're once again going to dig the hole. And we're requesting that if people have stuff that they'd like to put in the time capsule, which is fairly large, to drop it off at Northeastern Savings Bank, the Bedford Street branch. Northeastern Savings Bank has been extremely good to us in terms of donating money, time, effort, volunteers. They've been great. So I think anything much bigger than a shoebox isn't that great, but I do need like person's list of book and stuff like that in 75 years, people are going to open it and go, wow, well, whatever they're going to say. So that's on that's April 27th, but there's a contest going on in the schools right now, which I think is important, from kindergarten to grade 8, doing an essay for older kids, like 2 paragraphs, and pictures for the younger kids about wonderful Whitman. It's being done in the classroom, in all the schools. The winners are going to be chosen by their teachers. They're going to all get together. Those kids will have the essays put in the time capsule. They'll be here. They're going to be awarded a bank account that some of them have never had from Northeastern Savings Bank, which is really great. None of them are probably watching right now, but we're going to invite those kids to be in the parade on June 22nd. So that's kind of cool. We have the cornhole tournament, which people can still sign up, and there's going to be food. It's going to be at the KSC, so there's going to be, there's a bar there. We're going to have face painters and jumping houses and all that stuff. The road race, which is going to be on Sunday, June 8th, is going to start next to the fire station in the alley by the Memorial Arch. So they're going to come out of the arch and take a right and then do a similar route to all the road races that we used to have. That will be, you'll be able to sign up live. You'll be able to sign up online, live in the next couple of days. So we anticipate a pretty good turnout for that. And then, of course, we're going to have the band concert on June 14th with the fireworks afterwards, the boulevard where we used to let them off. And then Sunday, June 22nd, is going to be a pretty big parade, we hope. That's going to be the final event that we're doing. I do need to set up a joint meeting with the police chief and fire chief and the DPW in the very near future, so they're not surprised by any of this. Things are going very well. We're selling merchandise. There's a lot of people buying stuff, and they want part of what will ultimately be history. And if anybody does want to know why there was a breakup between Whitman and Abington, had to do with the school.
But anyway, does anybody have any questions?
You're not gonna dig up the old,
That's in another 50 years. The way that these were done was that was buried in 2000 to be dug up in 2075, and 2025 will be dug up in the year 2100, because that way we figured nobody would still be alive when they dug it up. So
no, because my wife has a copy of what they put my son.
right, yeah, your son won.
Yeah.
So I have lists of stuff that was in that one, if anybody wants to see it. There's also a thing in the clerk's office, to my understanding, that shows the dimensions of off the corner of the building. They shot it, the DPW, so they know exactly where it is. And I'm not sure, I'll leave you with this. I found a picture of the time capsule being dropped into the hole in April of 2000, and the two people that were lowering it on ropes were Timothy Greno and Tommy Burnett. So I found them both and asked them if they'll do it again.
Nice.
So there. So if nobody has any questions, thank you all very much.
Thanks.
And hope to see you all a week from Saturday night.
See ya.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the budget update. I guess we did it already, didn't we? Town administrator's report, free cash policy.
Free cash, okay. So I'd like to establish a budgetary policy for the use of free cash, proposing the following actions. I think that this will really put us on a good road for the future if we just do this every single year. So the first thing I'd like to do is have 10% of the certified free cash amount each fiscal year allocated to the capital stabilization fund, not to be expended, of course, in the same year. We're a savings account that we're slow and steady adding to. And then I would like to see another 10% of the remaining balance of the certified free cash amount each fiscal year be allocated to the general stabilization fund. Also, we discussed a minimum of $200,000 each fiscal year be transferred from free cash to the Plymouth County retirement expense line until such time as the unfunded liability is paid off. Right now, it's scheduled for 2030, but as I said, I won't be surprised if that gets moved out another year or two. And then a minimum of $140,000 each fiscal year shall be transferred from the free cash to Article 2, other post-employment benefits. So I think that if we follow this every year, we are going to build a capital stabilization fund in the way that we should. I mean, Frank Lynham, my predecessor years ago, established the general stabilization fund, and, we've put money in there when we can. That money is not to be touched. I mean, that is the towns that touch the general stabilization fund are the towns that find themselves in trouble. Once they open that and start going after that, they have nothing. So I'd like to establish this policy to get us, some good reserves. We need a new fire engine. We need our software finance package for the treasurer, the collector, the accountant. It's beyond end of life. We really seriously need to look at putting something in. So I was hoping that you could adopt our
Is there a motion?
policy.
Yeah, I'll make that motion. Sounds like a good plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions?
I'll just say when you look online and like the communities that withstand some of these difficult times and the ones that really get into trouble, it's the ones that have their financial policy and those things set in place that kind of the rudder that keeps them on track. And there might be some difficult decisions in the future because of this, but if we follow that plan, it'll really keep us on solid financial ground.
And we're starting this year with it. So, I feel good about that, and I want to make sure that we continue to do that.
I would just see
Yes, Justin.
the unstated portion of that plan is that the remaining, 70 to 75% of the certified free cash would be our capital plan year over year.
Correct. And we were able to take care of the capital articles that were put forth this year and do these items for fiscal '26. So,
Anything else?
do we vote on that? Yes? And
No. It's been moved and seconded, though.
Okay.
All those in favor? Aye.
One other item
Yep.
that Justin, you and I can discuss is from the Capital Committee. The Capital Committee asked that I mention to the board the possibility of putting a borrowing article on this year's annual town meeting warrant for a fire engine. The cost is expected to go up 6% as of July 1st. It is a priority for the fire chief. Out of the capital items that he had, of course, that's such a big ticket item. It wasn't his first or his second request, but he does need this in the next few years. We also need, as I mentioned, the financial software, which is going to be quite costly. So, Justin, I don't know what you want to add to that.
Yeah, and I know the capital committee was, didn't weigh in as much on the financial software. Talked a bit about the fire engine, knowing it's going to be a need in the near future. The cost is expected to go up. I think where I sit, it's that I would prioritize the financial software over the fire engine because although it's a 1990 Chief, yeah, the old one. It is the third engine. It's the reserve. We have a 2008 and a 2016, give or take, 2004, yeah. That it's the primary and the secondary. So, whereas we have one financial software and it is beyond end of life and struggling with even the basic functions that get recommended to us by our auditors year over year. So, knowing we have two big capital items coming, I would prioritize the financial software as we're starting to put money away to capital stabilization rather than put forward a borrowing article while we're looking at an override and have large building projects on the horizon. I think we can get by a couple of years before we plan that fire engine purchase, even though one of the reasons it came forward was that we wouldn't have to pay until it's delivered, and the delivery is a couple of years out right now, 3 years. Yeah. So
I just wanted to mention that,
Yeah.
that because they asked that I bring that forth, so.
And so, yeah, I think if the board wanted to go forward authorizing the borrowing at the time that it's delivered in 3 to 4 years, today we could lock in the price today. I don't feel as comfortable doing that before we see the results of the override, basically, because there may be other priorities that come after that.
Okay, so this is back on the agenda again once we know a little bit more. Anything else?
That's all I have.
That's it?
That's it.
Just a question about that, sorry. The decision about borrowing would have to be made when? Like, what's the timeline on that?
A town meeting vote would be needed.
A town meeting, right.
Doesn't have to be this town meeting, but that would push out the day we place the order and lock in the price.
So we'd have to know before we set the warrant,
If it were,
if it were this year.
if it was happening for this year, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Okay, we need to go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, exception 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements, to review and approve executive session minutes 12/7/21, 1/18/22, 1/25/22, 1/31/22, and 2/1/22. Is there a motion?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Votes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And we're in executive session. We'll come back into open session only to adjourn.
What if